So, my name is Jacob Hubbard. I am the author of my debut novel, Sounds of Yesterday. It is a breakup story that's told from the perspective of an autistic person. The story is about two people, Rob and Anna, over the course of 5 years during the backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic, where in the process of Rob grieving the end of his relationship with Anna, it's forcing him as an autistic person come to terms with his traumas, insecurities in a neurotypical world. So that's the book in a nutshell and all that stuff. There's a lot going on there, but I'll give you the simplified version. Basically, I had an event happen in my life that caused me a lot of heartache, and I basically started writing Sounds of Yesterday as a way to process that grief of losing someone is super important to me. In the process of writing it, it forces me to basically treat it as a form of therapy and all that stuff. And then, long story short, it caused me to really reevaluate like internalized ableism, what it means to be a neurodivergent person in today's world, what does empathy look like. So basically, it was an avenue where I started off just writing it just to just process a breakup. It just grew into something even larger than that. I use a notability app on my iPad, so I like to basically outline literally by hand. I don't have my iPad with me, so I can't show you right now. But what I would do is I would take basically for those who don't know what notability is, it's basically an app that's exclusive to iPad where it's like a note-taking software. I use it to outline notes, character names, scene ideas, outline because I like to physically outline it by hand because it makes it a lot easier to like internalize what I want to write about. So, like, to give you an example, let's say I'm struggling with, okay, what direction is this book going to go in? And I don't like doing it with, like, say, electronic software, for example. Instead, what I like to do is, okay, I'm going to write this down by hand on notability apps. Like, okay, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. Now, obviously, I can diverge from that, of course. It's mostly just to get a general blueprint of what I want to have the story go in. And there's has been some studies have done where if you actually do things by hand, you're more likely to process and internalize that information than you would if, say, for example, if you were to have AI, for example, do it for you, which I don't know. Regardless of where you stand, where one stands on AI, for whatever the case might be, not even AI can replicate the actual process of internalizing how you want to tell your story by doing it by hand with an outline. And I like to do it with notability. Then once I have that done, I use my Google Docs to basically write down the first draft of each chapter bit by bit. I like to write the book as it's in the order I which I want my reader to read the book. Even with the current book I'm actually writing right now, which I won't go into detail in this interview, but basically I've been trying to like, take ideas and just write them down and all this stuff. And using the method I've been using has just been helpful in terms of figuring out, okay, what direction is this book going to go in? Because it's going to go a little bit more experimental approaches than even Sounds of Yesterday has, which again, I'm not going to go into too much into that book because it's still a work in progress. But that's just give you like an idea of my own writing process. What I'll also do is that I'll do what's called a vomit draft, where I will literally just go blah 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 blah, just to at least get the idea on paper so I have something to work with. I think it took me about, I'm trying to remember. It took me at least three or four drafts, maybe five, because it went through two or three rounds of beta readers before it was ready. Crucial. You have to have beta readers. Like otherwise, you run into the problem of like having your book go out there and then having the entire world tell you that your book effing sucks. You know. I did it to honor the person that the book inspired. Yes, it's a book explores trauma and grief and how neurodiversity or neurodivergence influences the way we think about empathy and all that stuff. For me, at least personally, it was a way to honor her memory, to honor who she was to me. To me, that was so important. To me, yes, all that exploration of grief and trauma and trying to tell a story and have it share with the world, that's all great and all but for me personally, that was a me to really honor her. Breakups from a neurodivergent perspective are not different from the passing of a loved one. It's the way we understand and end that loss, process that loss, excuse me. It's more like they're no longer in my life. It feels no different than when someone you love truly passes away. To me, the feeling is no different. It's to me they're equivalent. When you have a love that deep, when that relationship ends, it's no different than when your loved one has passed away because the feeling is the same. Some of the most surprising reactions I've had from for this book has actually been mostly from women, which obviously a lot of women are readers more than men. But generally speaking, most of the positive feedback, most positive reactions to the book have been from women. They've really identified with Rob. They really identified with Anna. They really identified with the themes and the ideas and the struggles that these characters go through. And it's a very human story. It shows a lot about compassion, what empathy looks like. It challenges the idea of how society views empathy, especially through a neurotypical context, and how the book is meant to challenge that perception, how it's meant to challenge the idea what grief looks like, how we're supposed to express grief and all that stuff, and how the book is meant to explore what does grief, how is someone who is neurodivergent, what does their process of grief look like in comparison to someone who is not neurodivergent and all that stuff? Because oftentimes in society, when we think about grief or trauma or anything like that, many times in society there's these expectations or scripts that we're expected to follow. If we don't follow them exactly right, we're not quote unquote grieving the right way. But I don't think there is a right way to grieve, honestly. Absolutely 100%. I would say if you have the courage to write and you have a story you want to get out there, just do it.